A billionaire heiress spent 18 months in prison for crimes she never committed. Her own husband helped frame her and watched her lose their unborn child. But Madison Harper didn't just survive. She faked her own death, built a new identity, and came back for revenge. This woman systematically destroyed everyone who betrayed her. 3 people ended up behind bars while she reclaimed a $2 billion empire. If you've ever felt powerless or been betrayed, this story proves that sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous. Hit like if you're ready for justice, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories that'll change how you see betrayal. You won't want to miss how this ends. Now, let me tell you about the night Madison's perfect life crumbled. Madison Harper Matthews stood in the marble lobby of Matthews, Sterling and Associates, her hands trembling as she clutched the divorce papers. The towering glass building in downtown Hartford gleamed in the afternoon sun, a monument to her husband's ambition and her own buried inheritance. At 28, Madison had perfected the art of invisibility. Her simple navy dress and modest heels made her blend into the background of Connecticut's legal elite. Nobody would guess that the quiet paralegal carried the bloodline of Harper Industries, one of America's largest manufacturing conglomerates. She pressed her hand against her 7-month pregnant belly, feeling the baby kick restlessly. Brad didn't know about the pregnancy yet. She had planned to tell him over dinner, back when she still believed their marriage could be saved. The elevator chimed softly as she rode to the 15th floor. Through the glass walls of the corner office, she could see Brad Matthews hunched over his mahogany desk. Even at 32, he carried himself like a man destined for greatness. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his navy suit tailored to emphasize his broad shoulders. Madison knocked gently on the doorframe. Brad looked up, his blue eyes flashing with irritation. "What are you doing here?" "Madison, I told you never to come to my office." She stepped inside and placed the divorce papers on his desk. "I think we need to end this, Brad, before things get worse." Brad's laugh was cold and sharp. He picked up the papers, glanced at them briefly, then tore them in half. The sound echoed in the quiet office like a gunshot. "You have nothing without me," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "No money, no connections, no future. You're a nobody from nowhere, and you always will be." Madison felt the familiar ache in her chest, the one that had been growing stronger for months. She had hidden her true identity for love, believing that Brad would cherish her for who she was, not what she owned. Now she realized that love had been one-sided from the beginning. "I know about Jessica," she whispered. Brad's expression didn't change. If anything, his smile grew wider. "Good. Then you know exactly where you stand." The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if sensing the tension in the room. Madison wrapped her arms around her belly protectively. "I'm pregnant. Brad. 7 months." For a moment, something flickered in Brad's eyes. Surprise, maybe even concern, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. "Congratulations," he said flatly. "I hope Jessica's okay with stepchildren." The words hit Madison like physical blows. She stumbled backward, her hand finding the wall for support. In that moment, she understood that the man she had married, the man she had loved with every fiber of her being, had never existed at all. "You can't be serious." Dead serious. Brad stood up and walked to the window, gazing out at the Hartford skyline. "Jessica and I are getting married next month. You can keep the house until the baby comes, but after that, you're on your own." Madison's vision blurred as tears filled her eyes. She had known their marriage was in trouble, but she had never imagined Brad could be this cruel. The man who had once whispered promises of forever into her ear was now discarding her like yesterday's newspaper. What about our vows? What about the life we planned together? Brad turned back to her, his face a mask of indifference. Plans change, Madison. Successful people adapt. You should try it sometime. The baby kicked one more time, and Madison felt something shift inside her. Not just physically, but emotionally. The naive young woman who had walked into this office was dying, and something harder was taking her place. "You'll regret this," she said quietly. "I doubt that." Brad returned to his desk and picked up a file, dismissing her without another glance. "Close the door on your way out." Madison walked to the elevator on unsteady legs, her mind reeling with the magnitude of what had just happened. As the doors closed, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the polished steel. The woman staring back at her looked broken, defeated. But deep in her eyes, something else was stirring. Something that would soon consume everything in its path. Madison drove home through the winding streets of West Hartford in a daze, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. The colonial houses with their manicured lawns and luxury cars seemed to mock her as she passed. This world had never been hers, no matter how hard she had tried to fit in. The house she shared with Brad was a modest two-story colonial, nothing compared to the mansion she had grown up in, but comfortable enough for a young couple starting their life together. Now it felt like a museum dedicated to her own foolishness. She pulled into the driveway and sat in the car for a long moment, trying to process what had just happened. Brad wanted a divorce. He was marrying Jessica Kane, the ambitious prosecutor who had been circling their social circle like a shark for months, and he didn't care about their unborn child. Madison pressed both hands to her belly and felt the baby respond with a gentle flutter. At least she wasn't completely alone. The front door opened before she could reach for her keys. Jessica Kane stepped onto the porch, her red hair gleaming in the afternoon sunlight. She wore a silk blouse and pencil skirt that emphasized every curve, looking like she belonged in a magazine rather than on Madison's doorstep. "Hello, Madison," Jessica said with a smile that didn't reach her green eyes. "We need to talk." Madison's stomach clenched. "What are you doing in my house?" "It's not your house anymore." Jessica held up a set of keys, dangling them like a trophy. "Brad asked me to pack your things. He thought it would be easier this way." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Madison grabbed the porch railing to steady herself, her pregnant belly making her feel off balance in more ways than one. "He can't just throw me out. This is my home, too." "Actually, he can." Jessica's voice was sweetly venomous. "The house is in his name only, as is the car you're driving, the credit cards in your wallet, and the bank accounts you thought were joint." Madison felt the blood drain from her face. She had been so trusting, so eager to merge their lives completely, that she had never thought to protect herself. Brad had insisted on handling all their finances, claiming it would be simpler that way. "Where am I supposed to go?" Jessica shrugged. "That's not my problem. Your suitcases are by the door. I'd suggest you collect them before the neighbors start talking." Madison pushed past Jessica into the house that had been her sanctuary for 3 years. The living room looked exactly the same, but everything felt different now, contaminated. 2 suitcases sat by the front door like silent witnesses to her exile. "How long has this been planned?" Madison asked, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. "Longer than you think." Jessica settled onto the sofa that Madison had picked out, crossing her legs with practiced elegance. "Brad and I met 2 years ago at the prosecutor's conference. We both realized we wanted the same things: success, power, a partnership that could take us places. What about love? Jessica's laugh was like glass breaking. Love is for people who can afford it. Brad and I are building an empire. The baby kicked hard, as if responding to Madison's rising distress. She doubled over slightly, one hand pressed to her side. Are you okay? For a moment, Jessica's mask slipped, revealing something almost human underneath. I'm fine. Madison straightened up, but the pain was getting worse. It felt like cramping, but sharper, more urgent. You don't look fine. Maybe you should sit down. Madison shook her head stubbornly. I need to get my things and go. She climbed the stairs to the bedroom she had shared with Brad, each step sending another spike of pain through her abdomen. The room looked different now that she knew what had been happening here. The bed she had slept in, dreaming of their future together, had been Jessica's stage for seduction. The pain hit her again, this time so intense that she had to grip the doorframe to keep from falling. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Jessica, she called out, her voice strained. What? I think I need to go to the hospital. Footsteps pounded up the stairs. Jessica appeared in the doorway, her face pale with concern. What's wrong? The baby. Madison felt wetness between her legs and looked down to see blood spreading across her light blue dress. Oh God, the baby. Jessica was already pulling out her phone, dialing 911. As the emergency operator answered, Madison sank to the floor, her world collapsing around her in waves of physical and emotional agony. The ambulance arrived within minutes, but it felt like hours. As the paramedics lifted Madison onto a stretcher, she caught sight of Brad's car pulling into the driveway. He got out slowly, his face grave. Is she going to be okay? He asked Jessica, not Madison. I don't know, Jessica replied, her hand finding his arm. Madison closed her eyes as they loaded her into the ambulance. The last thing she saw was Brad and Jessica standing together on the porch of what had once been her home, looking like the perfect couple they were destined to become. At the hospital, the doctors did everything they could, but it was too late. The stress and shock had triggered a miscarriage. Madison's daughter, the child she had already loved with every fiber of her being, was gone. She lay in the hospital bed afterward, staring at the ceiling and feeling nothing. Not pain, not sadness, not even anger. Just emptiness where her heart used to be. Brad never came. 6 months after losing everything, Madison Harper sat in a cramped studio apartment in Boston's North End, surrounded by law books and empty coffee cups. The space was a far cry from her former life, but it was hers. She had found work at a small immigration law firm, helping families navigate the complex legal system for a fraction of what she used to make. Her landlord, Mrs. Castellano, an elderly Italian woman who lived downstairs, had taken pity on her when she arrived with nothing but 2 suitcases and a broken heart. The apartment came furnished with mismatched furniture and questionable plumbing, but the rent was cheap and the neighborhood felt safe. Madison had lost weight since the miscarriage, her clothes hanging loose on her frame. She wore her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and had traded her designer wardrobe for thrift store finds. To anyone looking, she appeared to be exactly what she claimed a young woman starting over after a bad divorce. The law firm of Rodriguez and Associates occupied the ground floor of a converted brownstone. Carlos Rodriguez, the senior partner, was a kind man in his 50s who specialized in helping undocumented immigrants gain legal status. His English was peppered with Spanish phrases, and his office walls were covered with thank you cards from families he had helped reunite. Madison, can you come in here, please? Carlos called from his office. She gathered her files and walked down the narrow hallway. Carlos was sitting behind his desk with a tall man she didn't recognize. The stranger had sandy brown hair, intelligent blue eyes, and the kind of smile that made people trust him instantly. Madison Harper, I'd like you to meet Marcus Steele. He's with the district attorney's office. Marcus stood and extended his hand. His grip was firm and warm. Pleasure to meet you, Madison. Carlos tells me you're the best paralegal he's ever had. He's being generous. Madison felt heat rise in her cheeks. It had been so long since anyone had complimented her work. What can I help you with, Mr. Steele? Marcus, please, I'm working on a case involving corporate fraud, and I need someone with your background to help me understand some complex financial documents. Madison hesitated. Working with prosecutors made her nervous, especially after what Jessica had done to her marriage. But Carlos was nodding encouragingly, and they needed the money. What kind of case? A manufacturing company has been bribing city officials to overlook environmental violations. The paper trail is extensive, but I need someone who understands corporate structures to help me piece it together. Something in Madison's chest tightened. Harper Industries had always prided itself on ethical business practices. Her father had drilled into her the importance of doing the right thing, even when it was expensive. I can help, she said quietly. Over the next few weeks, Madison found herself working closely with Marcus on the corruption case. He was nothing like the prosecutors she had known in Hartford, where Jessica had been calculating and cold. Marcus was passionate about justice. He genuinely cared about the communities being hurt by corporate greed. They worked late into the evenings, poring over financial records and witness statements. Marcus brought dinner from the Italian restaurant down the street, and they ate by lamplight while building their case against the corrupt executives. You're brilliant at this, Marcus said one night, looking up from a stack of bank statements. Have you ever thought about going to law school? Madison shook her head. I can't afford it. There are scholarships, night programs. Someone with your skills shouldn't be limited by money. The comment hit closer to home than he realized. Madison wasn't limited by money at all. She was limited by fear. Fear of being discovered. Fear of being hurt again. Fear of trusting anyone with the truth about who she really was. But as the weeks passed, Marcus began to chip away at her defenses. He was patient and kind, never pushing for more information than she was willing to share. He brought her coffee in the mornings and made her laugh with stories from the courthouse. Slowly, carefully, Madison began to trust him. One evening, after they had successfully secured indictments against 3 company executives, Marcus suggested they celebrate with dinner at a real restaurant instead of takeout in the office. I don't know, Madison said, suddenly nervous. That sounds almost like a date. Would that be so terrible? Marcus's smile was gentle. I care about you, Madison. I have from the moment we met. Madison felt something flutter in her chest that she had thought was dead forever. Hope. I care about you, too. They went to a small bistro in the back bay, sitting at a candlelit table by the window. Marcus listened intently as Madison told him carefully edited versions of her past. She mentioned a difficult divorce, but left out the details about Brad's cruelty and her lost child. What made you want to be a prosecutor? She asked, deflecting attention from her own story. I grew up in foster care, Marcus said, his voice growing serious. I saw firsthand how the system can fail people who don't have power or money to protect themselves. I decided early on that I wanted to be on the side of justice. Madison's heart ached for the lonely child he must have been. Without thinking, she reached across the table and took his hand. I'm sorry you went through that. It made me who I am. His fingers tightened around hers. Strong enough to recognize something special when I see it. When he walked her home that night, Marcus kissed her gently on her doorstep. It was nothing like the passionate, desperate kisses she had shared with Brad in the early days of their relationship. This was tender, careful, full of promise. For the first time in months, Madison fell asleep, smiling. Over the next few weeks, their relationship deepened. Marcus was everything Brad hadn't been considerate, emotionally available, genuinely interested in her thoughts and feelings. He brought her flowers from the farmer's market and listened patiently when she woke up from nightmares about losing the baby. One evening, as they lay together in Madison's narrow bed, she felt brave enough to share a piece of her truth. "My maiden name was Harper," she said quietly. "My family had money, a lot of money." Marcus propped himself up on his elbow, studying her face in the dim light. "What happened to it?" "I walked away. I thought love was more important than wealth." She laughed bitterly. "I was wrong about both." "What kind of money are we talking about?" Madison hesitated, then took the plunge. "Harper Industries. My father founded it 40 years ago." Marcus went very still. "Harper Industries, the manufacturing conglomerate. You know it. Everyone in corporate law knows Harper Industries." "Madison, do you realize what this means? You're not just wealthy. You're one of the most powerful heiresses in America." Madison felt vulnerable under his intense gaze. "Power didn't stop my husband from leaving me. Money didn't save my baby." Marcus pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her protectively. "I'm not Brad. I would never hurt you like that." For a moment, Madison allowed herself to believe him. In Marcus's arms, she felt safe for the first time in months. She began to imagine a future where she could reclaim her inheritance and use it to build something good with a man who truly loved her. She was wrong about that too. Madison woke up in Marcus's arms, feeling lighter than she had in months. Sunlight streamed through the windows of his Cambridge apartment, and she could hear the sounds of the city waking up outside. For the first time since her world collapsed, she felt like she might actually have a future. Marcus stirred beside her, his arm tightening around her waist. "Good morning, beautiful." "Good morning." She turned to face him, studying the strong lines of his jaw and the way his hair fell across his forehead. "I could get used to this." "I hope you will." His voice was husky with sleep and something else. Affection, love. Madison didn't dare hope for too much, but the possibility made her heart race. They had been dating for 3 months now, and Madison had begun to let her guard down completely. Marcus had proven himself to be everything Brad wasn't: attentive, supportive, genuinely interested in her well-being. He never pushed her for information about her past, but he listened carefully when she chose to share. Last night, she had told him about Harper Industries, about her inheritance, about the billions of dollars sitting in trust funds and offshore accounts that she had never touched. It had felt like shedding a heavy coat she had been wearing too long. "Are you hungry?" Marcus asked, already reaching for his phone to order breakfast. "Starving." Madison stretched luxuriously, feeling more relaxed than she had in years. As Marcus scrolled through his phone looking for delivery options, Madison noticed something that made her blood run cold. A text message notification flashed across his screen, and she caught just enough of it to make her stomach clench. The Harper information confirmed. Proceeding as planned, Jay. "Who's Jay?" Madison asked, trying to keep her voice casual. Marcus's fingers stilled on the phone screen. "What?" "The text message from Jay? Who is that?" For just a moment, Marcus looked like a deer caught in headlights. Then his expression smoothed over, and he smiled. "Oh, that's just my partner on a case. Nothing important." But Madison had spent 3 years married to a man who lied to her daily. She recognized the signs, the slight tightening around his eyes, the way his voice pitched just a little higher, the pause before he answered. What case? Corporate fraud. Same stuff we've been working on. Marcus set his phone aside and leaned over to kiss her, clearly trying to distract her. Let's not talk about work. We have the whole day together. Madison kissed him back, but her mind was racing. Something was wrong. Very wrong. After Marcus left for the office, Madison spent the day trying to shake her uneasiness. She told herself she was being paranoid, that losing Brad and the baby had left her unable to trust anyone completely. But the feeling persisted. That evening, she decided to surprise Marcus at his office. She stopped by the Italian bakery and picked up cannoli, his favorite dessert, then walked the few blocks to the DA's office. The building was mostly empty at 7 o'clock, but she could see lights on in the upper floors. The security guard recognized her from her previous visits and waved her through. Madison took the elevator to the 8th floor, where Marcus's office was located. As she walked down the hallway, she could hear voices coming from behind his closed door. He was meeting with someone. She raised her hand to knock, then froze as she heard her own name. The Madison Harper situation is under control, Marcus was saying. She's completely trusting. She told me everything about the inheritance. Good. The responding voice made Madison's knees buckle. It was Jessica Kane. She has no idea that you and I have been working together on this from the beginning. Jessica continued, The poor little rich girl thinks she found true love. Madison pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering so hard she was afraid they might hear it. This couldn't be happening. Not again. The plan is elegant, Marcus said, and Madison could hear the satisfaction in his voice. She leads us to the Harper Industries accounts. We build a fraud case against her for embezzlement, and she goes to prison while we divide up the assets. What about Brad? Brad gets his cut for providing the initial intelligence about her identity. Amazing how useful a bitter ex-husband can be. Madison bit her fist to keep from crying out. Brad had known who she was all along. He had married her for her money, just like she had always feared. And when she wouldn't give him access to it, he had found another way. She's going to be devastated when she realizes the truth, Jessica said, and Madison could hear the smile in her voice. She'll get over it. Rich girls are resilient. What if she doesn't cooperate? What if she realizes what we're doing? Marcus laughed, and the sound made Madison's skin crawl. She won't. She's too desperate to be loved. Women like Madison. They'll believe anything if you tell them what they want to hear. Madison backed away from the door, her vision blurring with tears. The cannoli box fell from her hands, hitting the floor with a soft thud. She turned and ran for the elevator, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. She made it to the street before the sobs came. Leaning against a lamppost, she wept for her own stupidity. How could she have been so blind? How could she have trusted Marcus when every instinct should have warned her away? The signs had all been there. The way he had appeared so conveniently, just when she was most vulnerable. His interest in her background, his encouragement to tell him about her family's wealth. Even his kindness had been calculated, designed to make her lower her defenses. Madison walked home through the darkening streets, her mind racing. She had to get away from Boston, away from Marcus and Jessica and their web of lies. But where could she go? They knew everything about her now. Her real identity, her inheritance, her vulnerabilities. Back in her apartment, she began throwing clothes into a suitcase with shaking hands. Mrs. Castellano knocked on her door, concerned by the noise. Madison, cara mia, what's wrong? I have to leave, Madison said, not trusting herself to explain. Thank you for everything, but I have to go. The older woman studied her face, then nodded slowly. Sometimes running is the only way to survive. Be safe, Bambina. Madison hugged her impulsively, then grabbed her suitcase and headed for the door. She had enough cash to get to New York, maybe find a hotel room where she could think clearly and figure out her next move. But as she walked to her car, she noticed a black sedan parked across the street, the same sedan she had seen outside Marcus's building earlier. Her blood turned to ice. They were already watching her. Madison got in her car and drove carefully through the city streets, checking her rearview mirror constantly. The sedan followed at a distance, never getting too close, but never losing sight of her. She needed help. But who could she trust? Everyone in her life had either betrayed her or been part of the conspiracy from the beginning. She was truly alone. As she reached the outskirts of Boston, Madison made a decision that would change everything. Instead of running, she was going to fight back. But first, she needed to disappear completely. She took the next exit and drove toward a part of the city she had never been to before, where the streets were darker and the rules were different. If Marcus and Jessica wanted to play dirty, she would learn their game, and she would beat them at it. The federal courthouse in Boston buzzed with activity as Madison Harper walked through the metal detectors for what she thought would be a routine hearing. It had been 2 weeks since she discovered Marcus and Jessica's betrayal, and she had spent every day since then trying to figure out how to expose them. She had documented everything she could remember: their conversations about her inheritance, the suspicious timing of Marcus's appearance in her life, the connection to Jessica and Brad. She had even managed to secretly record a few phone conversations. Today, she planned to present this evidence to the FBI. Madison wore her best suit, a navy blue ensemble she had bought during her brief period of optimism about building a new life with Marcus. Now it felt like armor, protection against the wolves circling around her. She checked in at the security desk and was directed to the white-collar crimes unit on the 4th floor. Agent Patricia Wong, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, had agreed to meet with her after Madison claimed to have information about prosecutorial misconduct. "Miss Harper, thank you for coming in," Agent Wong said, gesturing for Madison to take a seat in her austere office. "You mentioned on the phone that you have evidence of corruption in the DA's office." Madison opened her briefcase and began laying out documents on the desk. Bank statements showing suspicious transfers, transcripts of recorded conversations, a timeline of events that clearly showed the conspiracy. "Assistant DA Marcus Steele and Prosecutor Jessica Kane have been working together to manipulate me into revealing information about my family's assets." Madison began. "They plan to frame me for embezzlement and steal my inheritance." Agent Wong examined the documents carefully, her expression unreadable. "These are serious allegations. Miss Harper, do you have any proof that these conversations actually took place?" Madison pulled out her phone and played one of her secretly recorded conversations with Marcus. His voice filled the small office, discussing strategy with someone he referred to as our mutual friend. "This is promising," Agent Wong said, making notes. "But we'll need more concrete evidence. Financial records, documented transfers, communications between the parties." "I can get those," Madison said eagerly. "Marcus trusts me completely. He has no idea that I know about his plan." Agent Wong leaned back in her chair, studying Madison with keen eyes. "Miss Harper, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Have you ever moved money from Harper Industries accounts without proper authorization?" The question caught Madison off guard. "No, of course not. I've never even accessed my trust funds." "Are you sure?" Because we have records showing significant transfers from Harper Industries subsidiaries to accounts associated with your maiden name. Madison felt the world tilt around her. That's impossible. I haven't touched any of that money since my father died. Agent Wong pulled out a thick folder and opened it on the desk. Inside were bank statements, transfer orders, and authorization forms, all bearing Madison's forged signature. According to our investigation, you've been systematically embezzling funds from Harper Industries for the past 6 months. The total amount is approximately $12 million. Madison's mouth went dry. Those signatures are forged. I never authorized any of these transfers. Miss Harper, I'm going to have to ask you to remain calm. We have video evidence of you accessing safety deposit boxes registered under your name, making cash withdrawals, and meeting with known money launderers. Agent Wong pulled out a series of photographs. Madison stared at them in horror. They showed a woman who looked exactly like her, but it wasn't her. The woman in the photos had her face, her hair, her build, but Madison had never been to any of these locations. This isn't me, Madison whispered. Someone is impersonating me. Miss Harper, you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. The words hit Madison like physical blows. She watched in stunned disbelief as Agent Wong called for backup and began reading her rights. This couldn't be happening. She had come here to expose a conspiracy, not to be arrested for crimes she didn't commit. As federal agents led her away in handcuffs, Madison caught a glimpse of familiar faces in the courthouse lobby. Marcus Steele and Jessica Kane stood near the information desk, watching her arrest with expressions of barely concealed satisfaction. Jessica caught Madison's eye and smiled. It was the same cold smile she had worn when she threw Madison out of her own home. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Marcus had never loved her. He had been using her from the moment they met, gaining her trust so he could steal her identity and her inheritance. The woman in the photographs was probably Jessica, surgically altered to look like Madison or simply an expert in disguise. They had played the long game, building an elaborate case against her while she foolishly believed she had found love again. Every tender moment, every kiss, every whispered promise had been part of their plan to destroy her. Madison was processed and booked at the Federal Detention Center in Boston. She was fingerprinted, photographed, and strip-searched by guards who treated her like any other white-collar criminal. Her one phone call went to a public defender who sounded bored and overworked. "The evidence against you is substantial," the lawyer said during their brief consultation. "Your best bet is to plead guilty and cooperate with the prosecution. You might get 5 to 7 years instead of 20. "I didn't do it," Madison said for the 100th time. "I'm being framed. They all say that, honey. Look, I've seen the case file. They have bank records, surveillance footage, witness testimony. The prosecutor is offering a deal now, but that won't last long." Madison realized she was truly on her own. No one believed her. No one cared about her innocence. She was just another rich girl who got too greedy and got caught. That night, lying on a narrow cot in her cell, Madison stared at the ceiling and tried to process the magnitude of her situation. She had lost her husband, her child, her home, her freedom, and now her identity. Everything that made her who she was had been systematically stripped away. But as she lay there in the darkness, something began to crystallize in her mind. Marcus and Jessica thought they had won, but they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated her. Madison Harper had been weak, trusting, naive. She had believed in love and fairness and the goodness of people. But that woman was gone now, destroyed as thoroughly as if she had never existed. The woman who would emerge from this cell would be someone entirely different, someone harder, smarter, more ruthless than her enemies could imagine. They wanted to play games. She would learn the rules. They wanted to destroy her. She would let them think they had succeeded. And then, when they least expected it, she would show them what a Harper was truly capable of. The game was far from over. Federal Correctional Institution Danbury was nothing like the minimum security facility Madison had expected. The concrete walls were topped with razor wire, and the guards carried themselves with the casual brutality of people who had seen too much human weakness. Madison's cellmate was a woman named Ruby Santos, a former accountant serving 5 years for tax evasion. Ruby was in her 50s, with silver-streaked black hair and eyes that missed nothing. She took one look at Madison and shook her head. "Let me guess," Ruby said in a voice roughened by years of cigarettes. "Rich girl who trusted the wrong people." Madison nodded, too exhausted to maintain her defenses. The trial had been swift and brutal. Marcus had testified against her with devastating effectiveness, presenting their relationship as a calculated attempt by Madison to use him for information about federal investigations. Jessica had painted her as a spoiled heiress who believed she was above the law. The evidence against her had been overwhelming. Bank records, surveillance footage, witness testimony. All of it fabricated but utterly convincing. Madison's court-appointed attorney had been competent but overworked, unable to match the resources marshaled against her. The sentence was 15 years in federal prison. "You made the classic mistake," Ruby continued, settling onto her narrow bunk. "You thought the system was designed to find the truth. It's not. It's designed to process cases efficiently. Truth is optional." Over the next few months, Ruby became Madison's guide to prison survival. She taught her which guards could be trusted, which inmates to avoid, and how to navigate the complex social hierarchy of incarcerated women. "The key is to become invisible," Ruby explained during one of their evening conversations. "Don't make enemies, but don't make friends either. Keep your head down, follow the rules, and count the days." But Madison found it impossible to stay invisible. Her case had been high profile, and everyone in the prison knew she was the Harper Industries heiress who had been caught stealing from her own company. Some inmates resented her for her former wealth. Others wanted to use her connections on the outside. The worst part was the letters. Every week, Madison received updates from her court-appointed financial administrator about the systematic dismantling of her inheritance. Marcus and Jessica had positioned themselves as victims of her fraud, claiming they had been investigating her crimes when she manipulated them into providing insider information. Harper Industries had been placed under federal oversight pending the resolution of the embezzlement case. The company her father had built from nothing was being sold off piece by piece to pay restitution for crimes Madison had never committed. "They're stealing everything," Madison told Ruby one night, her voice hollow with despair. "Not everything." Ruby replied cryptically, "What do you mean?" "People like you, rich people, you always have backup plans, offshore accounts, hidden assets, emergency funds. Your father didn't build an empire by keeping all his eggs in one basket." Madison had never thought about it that way. Her father had been paranoid about government interference in his business. He had always talked about protecting the family legacy from bureaucrats and thieves. What if he had prepared for exactly this kind of situation? Ruby seemed to know more about high-level financial crimes than a simple tax evader should. She asked too many specific questions about Madison's case, knew too much about federal prosecution strategies, spoke with too much authority about prison procedures. One night, Madison woke up to find Ruby sitting on her bunk, fully dressed. "Time to go," Ruby said quietly. "Go where?" "Somewhere we can talk privately." Ruby led her through dark corridors Madison had never seen before, using a key card she shouldn't have possessed. They ended up in an empty office in the administrative wing. "My real name is Ruby Chen," the older woman said, settling behind the desk. "I'm a private investigator specializing in financial crimes. I've been hired to help you." Madison stared at her in shock. "Hired by who?" "Someone who knew your father very well. Someone who's been watching this case from the beginning." Ruby pulled out a tablet and showed Madison a series of photographs. Marcus and Jessica at expensive restaurants, wearing jewelry and clothes far beyond their government salaries. Bank records showing mysterious deposits into their personal accounts. A paper trail connecting them to Brad's sudden rise in Hartford's legal scene. "Your enemies made a mistake," Ruby continued. "They got greedy. They couldn't resist flaunting their newfound wealth, and that created evidence." "Evidence of what?" "That they're the real thieves. The money they claim you stole. It never went to your accounts. It went to a series of shell companies controlled by Marcus and Jessica. They've been planning this for years, waiting for the right mark." Madison felt hope stirring in her chest for the first time in months. "Can we prove it?" "We're going to do more than prove it. We're going to destroy them." Ruby's smile was sharp as a knife. "But first, we need to get you out of here." "How?" "Your death." Madison's blood ran cold. "What?" "Madison Harper is going to die in a prison fight next week. Very tragic. The woman who survives will be someone else entirely. Someone with access to resources your father hid away for exactly this kind of emergency." Ruby pulled out a thick folder and placed it on the desk. Inside were documents Madison had never seen before. Accounts in the Cayman Islands, shell corporations in Switzerland, property deeds and false names, all of it tied to her father's signature. "William Harper was a smart man," Ruby said. "He knew that empires rise and fall, that even the most powerful families can be brought low by their enemies. He created a shadow version of everything he built, a backup plan." Madison stared at the documents, her mind racing. Her father had always been secretive about certain aspects of his business, claiming it was better for her not to know certain details. Now she understood why. "Who hired you?" Madison asked again. Ruby smiled. "Someone who owes your family a debt. Someone who's been waiting for the right moment to collect." The plan Ruby outlined was audacious and dangerous. Madison would stage her own death using contacts Ruby had cultivated during years of undercover work. She would emerge with a new identity and access to resources that would allow her to take revenge on everyone who had betrayed her. "Are you ready to stop being a victim?" Ruby asked. Madison thought about Marcus's gentle lies, Jessica's cruel smile, Brad's casual dismissal of their marriage vows. She thought about her lost child, her stolen inheritance, the 18 months she had spent in prison for crimes she hadn't committed. "I'm ready," she said. A week later, the news reported a tragic incident at FCI Danbury. Madison Harper, the disgraced heiress, had been killed in a fight with another inmate. Her body was cremated quickly, per her stated wishes, and her ashes were scattered at sea. What the news didn't report was that the woman who died looked remarkably like Madison, but was actually a terminally ill inmate who had volunteered for the deception in exchange for money for her family. The real Madison Harper walked out of prison under a new name, with a new face courtesy of an underground plastic surgeon and access to more money and power than her enemies could imagine. She was no longer the naive young woman who had believed in love and justice. She was something far more dangerous. Victoria Cross adjusted her reflection in the mirror of her Manhattan penthouse, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. The plastic surgery had been subtle, but transformative. Her cheekbones were higher, her nose refined, her jaw slightly altered, She could walk past Marcus Steele on the street, and he wouldn't give her a second glance. It had been 6 months since Madison Harper's reported death, and Victoria had spent every day preparing for her return. Ruby had introduced her to Vincent Chen, Ruby's actual nephew and a former FBI agent who had been forced out of the Bureau for investigating corruption too aggressively. The first rule of revenge, Vincent had told her during their initial meeting, is patience. Your enemies think they've won. Let them get comfortable. Let them make mistakes. Vincent was everything Marcus had pretended to be: genuinely committed to justice, ethically driven, and completely trustworthy. He had been investigating the corruption network that included Marcus and Jessica for years, gathering evidence that the FBI had been too politically motivated to pursue. Your case was just the beginning, Vincent explained, spreading files across the conference table of their secure office. Marcus and Jessica have been running this scam for years. They identify wealthy women going through divorces or personal crises, manipulate them into revealing financial information, then frame them for embezzlement while stealing their assets. Victoria studied the photographs of other women who had been targeted: young widows, divorcees, heiresses who had trusted the wrong people. Most were serving prison sentences for crimes they hadn't committed. How many victims? At least 12 that we can document. Probably more. The scope of the conspiracy was breathtaking. Marcus and Jessica had refined their system to near perfection, using their positions in law enforcement to cover their tracks and silence anyone who got too close to the truth. But they had made one crucial error. They had targeted a Harper. Victoria's father had indeed prepared for exactly this situation. The shadow empire Ruby had revealed was worth over $2 billion, completely invisible to government oversight. Offshore accounts, legitimate businesses operating under false names, real estate holdings across 3 continents, all of it designed to survive even the complete destruction of Harper Industries. Your father was paranoid, Vincent had said admiringly, in the best possible way. Victoria used these resources to build her new identity as a successful businesswoman with interests in financial consulting. She rented the Manhattan penthouse, bought a wardrobe of designer clothes, and hired the best lawyers money could buy. To the outside world, Victoria Cross was a sophisticated woman with impeccable credentials and mysterious backing. The first phase of her revenge was infiltration. Marcus had left the DA's office 6 months after Madison's conviction, using his newfound fame as the prosecutor who brought down a corrupt heiress to launch a private practice specializing in white-collar defense. His firm, Steele and Associates, occupied the top 3 floors of a prestigious building in downtown Boston. Jessica had also leveraged her success into a promotion, becoming a senior prosecutor with ambitions for higher office. She and Marcus made no secret of their relationship now, appearing together at charity galas and political fundraisers as Boston's newest power couple. Brad had parlayed his cooperation in the case into a partnership at a major Hartford firm. He drove a Tesla now and lived in a mansion in West Hartford's most exclusive neighborhood. They all thought they were untouchable. Victoria's plan began with a simple phone call to Marcus's office. Steele and Associates, how may I help you? This is Victoria Cross. I need legal representation for a complex embezzlement case. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. Victoria spent days preparing, studying every detail of Marcus's psychological profile. Ruby had taught her that successful deception required understanding your target's weaknesses and desires. Marcus Steele craved validation and respect. He wanted to be seen as a brilliant legal mind, not just someone who had gotten lucky with a high-profile case. Victoria would give him exactly what he needed. She arrived at his office wearing a charcoal gray suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her hair was styled in an elegant chignon, and she carried herself with the confidence that came from unlimited resources. Marcus kept her waiting exactly 10 minutes, a power play she had expected. When he finally emerged from his inner office, she could see him appraising her with the same calculating look she remembered from their first meeting. "Miss Cross, thank you for coming in. How can I help you?" His voice was exactly the same, warm and reassuring, designed to make vulnerable people trust him. Victoria felt a moment of pure rage, then channeled it into cold focus. "I'm being investigated for financial irregularities at my consulting firm," she said, settling into the leather chair across from his desk. "The charges are completely fabricated, but I need someone who understands how federal prosecutors think." Marcus leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued. "What kind of amounts are we discussing?" $50 million. She watched greed flicker in his eyes before he covered it with professional concern. "That's a serious matter. The federal prosecutors in this district are very aggressive about white-collar cases." "So I've heard. I understand you recently handled a high-profile embezzlement case." Madison Harper. Marcus's expression darkened slightly. "A tragic situation. She was a brilliant woman who let greed corrupt her judgment." Victoria forced herself to nod sympathetically. "It must have been difficult, prosecuting someone you knew personally. Professional duty comes first." Marcus replied, but she could hear the satisfaction in his voice. He was proud of what he had done to Madison. They spent the next hour discussing Victoria's fictional case. She spun an elaborate story about business partners trying to frame her for their own crimes, watching Marcus's reactions carefully. He was definitely interested, but he was also being careful. Madison's supposed death might have spooked him. "I'll need to review your financial records," Marcus said finally. "All of them. Complete transparency is essential if we're going to mount an effective defense." There it was. The same request he had made of Madison. The same trap that had destroyed so many other women. "Of course," Victoria said. "I'll have my accountants prepare everything." She stood to leave, then turned back as if struck by a sudden thought. "I'm hosting a small dinner party next week. Some potential investors, a few influential people. Would you and your partner like to attend? I find that business relationships work better when there's a social component." Marcus's smile was genuine for the first time in their meeting. "We'd be delighted." Victoria left the office feeling a mixture of satisfaction and disgust. Marcus hadn't changed at all. He was still the same predator, still using his charm and professional authority to manipulate vulnerable women. But Victoria Cross wasn't vulnerable. She was dangerous, and Marcus Steele was about to learn the difference. Victoria's penthouse overlooked Central Park, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of Manhattan's skyline. She had spared no expense on the dinner party, hiring a team of caterers, florists, and servers to create an atmosphere of understated luxury. The guest list was carefully curated. Vincent Chen attended as her business partner, using his real name and credentials as a former FBI agent turned private security consultant. She had invited 2 actual investors who had no idea they were unknowingly participating in a con. Most importantly, she had invited Marcus Steele and Jessica Kane. Victoria wore a stunning black dress that had cost more than Marcus made in a month as a prosecutor. She moved through the room with practiced grace, playing the perfect hostess while secretly documenting everything with hidden cameras Vincent had installed throughout the apartment. Marcus and Jessica arrived fashionably late, both dressed to impress. Jessica wore a red cocktail dress that clung to her curves, her auburn hair styled in perfect waves. Marcus was in a navy suit that Victoria recognized as expensive but not quite expensive enough for someone of his supposed success level. "Victoria, your home is magnificent," Jessica said, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server. "Thank you. I believe in surrounding myself with beautiful things. Victoria's smile was warm and genuine seeming. Life is too short for anything less than perfection. She watched Jessica's eyes narrow slightly, recognizing a potential rival. Perfect. Competitive women made more mistakes. The dinner conversation flowed smoothly. Victoria had researched her guests thoroughly, steering the discussion toward topics that would make Marcus and Jessica feel important and valued. She asked Marcus about his most challenging cases, praised Jessica's prosecutorial record, and made them both feel like the sophisticated professionals they pretended to be. I have to say, Marcus said during the main course, "Your case intrigues me. Financial conspiracies of this magnitude usually leave more obvious trails." "That's exactly why I need the best representation," Victoria replied. "I've been very careful about my business practices, but careful isn't enough when people are determined to destroy you." She caught Vincent's eye across the table. He gave an almost imperceptible nod. It was time for the next phase. "I should probably mention," Victoria said casually, "that I knew Madison Harper." The effect was immediate. Marcus's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Jessica's champagne glass trembled slightly in her hand. "You knew her?" Jessica asked, her voice carefully neutral. "We met at a charity function years ago, before her troubles, obviously. Such a tragic story." Victoria shook her head sadly. "I heard she died in prison. Violence among inmates is so senseless." "Yes, very tragic." Marcus agreed, but Victoria could see sweat beading on his forehead. "I've always wondered," Victoria continued thoughtfully, "how someone so intelligent could make such obviously stupid mistakes. I mean, embezzling from her own family's company, using her real name on bank accounts. It's almost like she wanted to get caught." "Criminals often self-destruct," Jessica said quickly. "Guilt manifests in self-sabotaging behavior." Victoria nodded as if this made perfect sense, while mentally noting Jessica's eagerness to redirect the conversation. Guilty conscience. Perhaps after dinner. Victoria offered to show her guests the apartment's private art collection. She led them through rooms filled with carefully chosen pieces, each one worth more than Marcus's annual salary. The message was clear: Victoria Cross had unlimited resources. In her study, surrounded by first-edition books and museum-quality paintings, Victoria revealed the next layer of her trap. "I want to show you something," she said, opening a wall safe hidden behind a Monet. Inside were stacks of documents and several hard drives. "These contain the real financial records of my consulting business. Everything the prosecutors claim to have is fabricated." Marcus's eyes lit up with unmistakable hunger. "Victoria, you shouldn't be showing us this without proper legal protections in place." "I trust you," Victoria said simply. "Besides, I need allies who understand how the system really works." She pulled out one of the hard drives and handed it to Marcus. "This contains records of over $200 million in legitimate transactions. If the prosecutors had access to this information, they'd have to drop all charges immediately." Marcus turned the drive over in his hands, and Victoria could practically hear his mind calculating. $200 million. More money than he had ever imagined stealing. "We should schedule a formal meeting," Marcus said. "Review everything properly." "Of course, but I was hoping we could move quickly. I have reasons to believe the prosecutors are planning to freeze my account soon." Jessica leaned forward, her predatory instincts fully engaged. "What kind of timeline are we discussing?" "Ideally, I'd like to transfer the most vulnerable assets to secure accounts within the week, before they can get injunctions." Victoria watched their faces change as they processed this information. To them, she wasn't offering evidence of her innocence. She was offering them the opportunity of a lifetime a mark with $200 million, who was desperate enough to move money quickly and quietly. "We can certainly help with that," Marcus said, his professional demeanor slipping slightly to reveal the predator underneath. The evening ended with promises to meet again soon. Victoria walked her guests to the elevator, playing the perfect hostess until the doors closed. Then she turned to Vincent, who had been observing everything from the kitchen. "They took the bait." Vincent said, "It wasn't a question. Hook, line, and sinker. They think I'm the perfect mark, desperate, wealthy, and trusting." Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade. "They have no idea they're about to become the stars of their own downfall." Vincent nodded approvingly. "The next 48 hours are crucial. They'll be moving fast now, trying to set up the infrastructure to steal your fictional fortune. And when they do, we'll have everything on tape: financial records, communications, the whole conspiracy." Victoria walked to her window and gazed out at the glittering city below. They wanted to destroy Madison Harper. Now they're going to meet Victoria Cross, and she doesn't forgive. The game was entering its final phase. Soon, Marcus and Jessica would learn that some prey bite back. The raid began at dawn. FBI agents surrounded Marcus Steele's Boston office building, blocking every exit while tactical teams moved through the floors. Similar scenes played out simultaneously at Jessica Kane's home in Cambridge and Brad Matthews' law firm in Hartford. Victoria Cross stood across the street from Marcus's building, watching through tinted windows as agents led him away in handcuffs. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. Vincent Chen sat beside her in the back seat of their rented sedan, monitoring multiple law enforcement radio frequencies through an encrypted device. "Jessica's in custody," he reported. "Brad, too. They got the entire network in one sweep." Victoria felt no satisfaction, only a cold sense of completion. For 18 months, she had planned this moment. The evidence she and Vincent had gathered was overwhelming recordings of Marcus and Jessica planning to steal her fictional fortune, financial records showing their previous thefts, testimony from other victims who had finally found the courage to come forward. The investigation Vincent had been building for years had finally reached critical mass, with Victoria's case providing the final piece prosecutors needed to bring down the entire conspiracy. "The apartment is clean?" Victoria asked. "Swept this morning. No trace of Victoria Cross ever existed." Within an hour, the Manhattan penthouse would be empty, its lease terminated by an untraceable shell corporation. Victoria Cross would disappear as completely as she had appeared, leaving behind only the evidence that had destroyed her enemies. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Ruby Chen, who was coordinating media coverage from her position as a reformed whistleblower with connections throughout the justice system. "All three networks are running the story. Massive legal conspiracy exposed. The victims are finally getting their justice." Victoria allowed herself a small smile. The women Marcus and Jessica had framed were being exonerated, their cases reopened based on the new evidence. Most would be released from prison within days, their reputations restored, their stolen assets returned. It was more than revenge. It was justice. "Where to now?" Vincent asked as their driver pulled away from the curb. "Switzerland first, then the Cayman Islands. I need to consolidate my father's hidden assets and figure out what to do with Harper Industries." The federal government had begun the process of returning the company to Madison Harper's estate, unaware that the supposed heir was very much alive. Victoria would need to carefully navigate the legal complexities of reclaiming her inheritance without revealing her survival. But that was a problem for another day. Today was about closure. Her phone rang as they drove through the streets of Boston one last time. The caller ID showed only a number, but Victoria recognized Ruby's voice immediately. "It's done," Ruby said simply. "Marcus just confessed everything in exchange for a reduced sentence, 25 years instead of life. Jessica's trying to make a deal, but the prosecutors aren't interested. She's looking at 40 to life. And Brad, 15 years minimum. His cooperation in the original case against you is being treated as part of the conspiracy now." Victoria closed her eyes, feeling a weight she had carried for 3 years finally lift from her shoulders. Brad Matthews, the man who had torn up their divorce papers and told her she was nothing, would spend the next decade and a half in federal prison. Marcus Steele, who had whispered promises of love while plotting to steal her identity, would die behind bars. Jessica Kane, who had poured boiling water on a pregnant woman's dreams, would never taste freedom again. Justice had been served, cold and precise. "There's something else," Ruby continued. "The FBI found records of your miscarriage in the files they seized from Marcus's office. He knew about your pregnancy when he started manipulating you. Jessica knew too." Victoria's hand instinctively moved to her stomach, where her child should have been. They had known she was grieving the loss of her baby, and they had used that vulnerability against her. Some sins were unforgivable. "Thank you, Ruby, for everything. You did this yourself, kiddo. I just provided the tools." Vincent was watching her carefully as she ended the call. "Are you okay?" "I will be." Victoria turned to look out the window as Boston disappeared behind them. "For the first time in 3 years, I actually believe that." The airport was crowded with business travelers and tourists, everyone focused on their own journeys and destinations. Victoria moved through the crowds invisible and anonymous, just another well-dressed woman catching a flight. At the gate, she bought a newspaper and saw her story on the front page. "Federal corruption scandal rocks legal community." The photo showed Marcus being led away in handcuffs, his face hidden behind his hands. A smaller headline caught her attention: "Madison Harper Conspiracy Revealed." The article detailed how evidence had emerged proving her innocence, vindicating her claims of being framed. Legal experts were calling it one of the most sophisticated frame-ups in modern judicial history. Victoria Harper smiled as she read about Madison Harper's posthumous exoneration. The world would remember her as a victim of injustice, not as a criminal. Her father's legacy would be restored. Harper Industries would rise again. And somewhere in the Swiss Alps, a woman named Victoria Cross would disappear forever, taking her secrets with her. As her flight was called for boarding, Victoria stood and gathered her things. In her purse was a single photograph herself and her unborn daughter from the ultrasound she had never shown Brad. She carried it everywhere now, a reminder of what she had lost and why the price of betrayal was so high. The plane lifted off into a clear blue sky, carrying her toward a future she had carved out of the ashes of her former life. Victoria closed her eyes and tried to imagine what came next. For the first time in years, the possibilities seemed endless. 6 months after the raids, Madison Harper walked into the offices of Harper Industries for the first time in 4 years. The receptionist didn't recognize her, which was exactly what she had hoped for. The subtle plastic surgery, the confident bearing, the expensive business suit, all of it contributed to an image of professional authority that commanded immediate respect. "I'm here to see the board of directors," Madison told the receptionist. "My name is Madison Harper." The young woman's eyes widened in shock. Madison Harper was supposed to be dead. Within minutes, the entire executive floor was buzzing with whispered conversations and hurried phone calls. The board members filed into the conference room with expressions ranging from confusion to suspicion to cautious hope. Madison had prepared for this moment carefully. Vincent Chen sat beside her as her legal counsel, armed with documents that proved her identity beyond any doubt: DNA tests, fingerprint comparisons, dental records, everything the lawyers would need to verify that the dead heiress was very much alive. "Ladies and gentlemen," Madison began, standing at the head of the mahogany table where her father had once commanded similar meetings, "I know my presence here raises questions. Allow me to explain." The story she told was carefully crafted, a mixture of truth and necessity. She had been in witness protection, she explained, cooperating with federal investigators to expose the corruption that had destroyed her life. Her death had been staged to protect her from retaliation while she gathered evidence against Marcus Steele and his conspiracy. The board members listened in stunned silence as she outlined the systematic destruction of their company's reputation, the theft of assets, the manipulation of legal proceedings that had nearly destroyed everything William Harper had built. "The question now," Madison continued, "is whether Harper Industries will rise from the ashes or remain a casualty of other people's greed." Over the following weeks, Madison threw herself into rebuilding the empire she had inherited. The company had been gutted during her supposed death, its most valuable assets sold off to pay fictitious debts, but the core infrastructure remained, and Madison had resources her enemies had never suspected. The hidden fortune her father had accumulated allowed her to buy back controlling interests in key subsidiaries, rehire essential personnel, and restart production lines that had been shuttered. More importantly, it gave her the capital to modernize and expand in ways her father had never imagined. Madison transformed Harper Industries from a traditional manufacturing conglomerate into a technology-focused company specializing in renewable energy and sustainable production. She hired the best minds in green technology, invested heavily in research and development, and positioned the company as a leader in the emerging clean economy. The media coverage was extensive and largely positive. Madison Harper's return from the dead, her vindication in the conspiracy case, and her dramatic corporate transformation made for compelling headlines. Business magazines put her on their covers. Television news programs profiled her as a symbol of resilience and reinvention. But the most important changes were personal. Madison established the Harper Foundation, a charitable organization focused on helping women who had been victimized by domestic violence and financial fraud. She hired Ruby Chen as the foundation's director of investigations, using Ruby's skills to help other women escape situations similar to her own. The foundation's first major initiative was a legal aid program providing free representation to women facing false accusations or fraudulent charges. Madison knew firsthand how the legal system could be weaponized against vulnerable people, and she was determined to level the playing field. She also quietly reached out to the other victims of Marcus and Jessica's conspiracy, offering financial assistance and counseling services. Many of these women had lost everything, just as Madison had. The foundation helped them rebuild their lives with dignity and hope. One evening, as Madison worked late in her office overlooking Hartford's skyline, Vincent knocked on her door. "The final settlements came through," he reported, setting a stack of documents on her desk. "Marcus's assets, Jessica's accounts, even Brad's pension funds. Everything they stole has been recovered and distributed to their victims." Madison nodded without looking up from the financial reports she was reviewing. Harper Industries was showing record profits, but she was more interested in the foundation's quarterly review. They had helped over 200 women in the past 6 months. "Any word from the parole hearings? Marcus won't be eligible for parole for 20 years. Jessica's appeal was denied. Brad's trying to claim his cooperation was coerced, but the courts aren't buying it." Madison felt nothing at this news. No satisfaction, no anger, just a distant sense of completion. Her enemies were no longer her concern. They were irrelevant to the life she was building. "There's something else," Vincent said carefully. The medical examiner released their final report on your supposed death. The woman who died in your place, Maria Santos. She left a letter. Madison looked up sharply. Maria had been Ruby's contact, a terminally ill inmate who had volunteered for the deception in exchange for money for her family. Madison had never known her real name. Vincent handed her a sealed envelope. Ruby thought you should have this. Madison opened the letter with trembling fingers. Maria's handwriting was shaky but legible. Dear Miss Harper, by the time you read this, I will be gone and you will be free. I don't know exactly what those people did to you, but I know what it feels like to be powerless. I know what it feels like when the world decides you don't matter. I never had children of my own, but I had dreams once. Big dreams. I hope you use your second chance to dream big again, not just for yourself, but for all of us who never got the chance to fight back. My dying doesn't mean anything if you don't live fully. So live, Miss Harper, live brilliantly. Maria Santos. Tears blurred Madison's vision as she finished reading. Maria Santos had given her life so that Madison could reclaim hers. The gift was both humbling and empowering. That night, Madison stood on the balcony of her penthouse apartment, looking out over the city lights. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The naive young woman who had believed in fairy tales, the broken victim who had lost everything, the avenging angel who had systematically destroyed her enemies. All of those women lived inside her now, their experiences woven into a strength she was still learning to understand. She was no longer the Madison Harper who had tearfully served divorce papers to an unfaithful husband. She was someone entirely new, forged in fire and tempered by loss. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ruby. New case just came in. Young widow being targeted by inheritance fraud. Interested. Madison typed back immediately. Send me everything. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new opportunities to turn pain into purpose. But tonight, she simply stood in the darkness and remembered a woman named Maria Santos, who had believed that dying could be an act of hope. Madison Harper was alive, more than alive. She was unstoppable, and she was just getting started.